Welcome to D6 Second Generation Curriculum. My name is David Jones, and I'm the Young Adult Editor for the Brink. I want to thank you for taking part in D6 Second Generation Curriculum. I'm here today with Elizabeth, who will be a teacher for the Brink. Now, Elizabeth, tell us a little bit about your church context, the size of your class, the group of your class, who all's involved with that?
Well, I'm in a class full of 20-somethings, I guess you could say. We have anybody from 18 years old up to almost 30, a few college students, a couple of newlywed couples, and some young professionals.
Now, how familiar are you with D6?
Well, I don't know a lot about D6. I do know the phrase every age on the same page, and that you all have the devotional study guide. So I'm super excited about that, but I really don't know much beyond that.
D6 comes from Deuteronomy 6, which tells us that parents are the primary spiritual influencers in the home and of their children. Now, with what you mentioned with most churches as well, that young adult category, there aren't a lot of kids quite there yet. There are some. So it does help train parents and future parents, but it also teaches generational discipleship. It helps young adults learn, how can I mentor a high school student, an elementary school student. It kind of creates a different definition of home, since college students are away from home, people have moved away from their parents for jobs, but it still encompasses that whole D6 principle.
So you've referred to this curriculum as second generation. What's the difference in second generation from the first?
Well, everything that I just mentioned was part of the first generation.
Okay.
But the second generation is adding in more features. It's going to be even better. There's going to be a 6-year scope and sequence. So essentially, the entire Bible is covered in that 6-year period. So that's an incredible thing. The other aspect of it is we're actually hitting 3 units for every quarter. Rather than just focusing on one book over 13 weeks or 14 weeks, this time we're breaking it down into 3 units. You'll have an Old Testament unit, a New Testament unit, and then you'll also have a special topics unit. This kind of has an apologetics focus, a Christian worldview focus, and it touches on cultural issues that are really affecting people today. We're also infusing more of a grace-based approach in the curriculum. And also, what's really great about this, it's available in both print and digital download.
Okay, great. That sounds really good to use for my class.
Well, let's talk a little bit about what you'll actually be getting with the Brink, especially you as a teacher. There's 2 components that you're going to notice first off. One is the devotional study guide, and one is the Brink Leaders Pack.
Okay, so what comes in the Leaders Pack?
Well, the Leaders Pack is really your core for what you're teaching. The first thing you'll probably see is the Brink Leaders Guide. That contains the entire lesson that you're going to be teaching to your small group and to your class, whether that's on Sundays or Tuesday nights at a coffee house, wherever that may be. What's also included in the pack is a set of PowerPoint slides so that you can customize yourself. So if you want to include discussion questions on there or thoughts for the day, anything like that, you can put those on there. We also include some handouts, both for you and the people in your class. You can use these handouts to create outlines, customize things. You can also pass out some of the discussion questions to the students in your class, so they're kind of prepared for what's coming, and so they also have something to do on their own time.
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and walk Elizabeth through the first lesson that we have. And if you have it with you, if you want to go ahead and follow along with us too as well, that may help kind of understand the process. We're looking at the lesson, Where Did I Come From? Now, one of the first things that you're going to see on here is the text from Genesis 1:1 through 2:3. And you're also going to see the theme on there from God Created the World. Now, this is the theme and scripture that every age that's using D6 curriculum will actually study, from kindergarten to grandparents. So it brings in that family alignment. They're all studying the same thing. You're also going to see the checklist on here. That helps with preparation. It reminds the teacher how to get organized, what they need to do for PowerPoint and handouts. We even provide some hints on what needs to be done to prepare for the lesson that day, what you're actually going to do during your meeting time. Now, what you'll also see on here is the timeline. The timeline is included in the first lessons of each Old Testament and New Testament lesson, and this helps students see where the Bible fits in a historical context. Now we're going to take a look at the body of the lesson now.
Okay.
The Brink follows the CLEAR learning system.
What does CLEAR stand for? What is the CLEAR learning system?
Well, it follows 5 points. There's connect, learn, explore, apply, and respond. Now, with connect, what that is, that's basically getting you into the lesson, sort of like the icebreaker. Figuring out where you're going, getting people's attention, just kind of getting everybody comfortable with discussion of what's coming up. Then you get into learn, and that's really about what does the scripture say? What is this lesson about? It's the meat. It is the scripture of the lesson. Explore kind of goes into the cultural side of things, the apologetic side of things, the background of the text. And what we've done is we've actually interspersed explore throughout the lesson. So you won't just find one section that's on explore. You'll find little nuggets here and there that tell you a little bit more about the text. Now, apply gets into the idea of how does this apply to me? It's that practical application. And apply blends with learn. We want students to see, okay, here's what the text says. Now, how do I apply it to my life? What does this mean to me? Then when you get to respond, it's that whole idea of what do I do now? What do I do with this text? How should I live differently because of it? And so we really challenge students to respond to the text they just heard.
So I really like the structure of this curriculum, but I've also seen a few more features that are popping out at me throughout this, like the D6 doorpost. Can you explain some of those things to me?
Yeah, sure. Well, the D6 doorposts show up in lessons all across the ages, and these are the key principles that frame a biblical worldview.
Okay.
Now, some of the other things you may notice, there are teaching tips that are in the sidebars in the lessons. It just kind of gives some ideas, some practical suggestions for teachers. You'll also notice some thumbnails that show up kind of telling you about the handouts that you can give out to students or the handouts you use for yourself. Also, one of the coolest features that we've added, you'll notice that most of the scripture is underlined, and many of the links in the lesson are underlined too. Those are hyperlinks, and if you're using the lesson from a digital format and you've got it on your computer, you just simply click on it and you're taken to a page that shows you the entire scripture that you need to read. It takes you to a YouTube video to show to your class, different things like that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And that's really about all you need to teach your first lesson.
Okay, cool. So I heard you mention earlier about the devotional study guides. How does that wrap into Sunday lessons?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. The devotional study guide contains 13 weeks of devotions.
Okay.
And the scripture that you are actually using for your devotion on Saturday or Sunday, whenever you decide to do it, is the same exact scripture that you're studying when your group actually meets that week.
Oh, okay.
So essentially, you're preparing ahead of time for when you go into your discussion with your group. You know the scripture, you've already studied it a little bit, you've done your devotion on it, and so it connects in that way, and it really helps reinforce what you're studying, and it helps enrich everything. Now, the other aspect, too, that comes along is we have articles in the devotional study guide that deal exactly with what you're studying through Sundays or whenever your group meets. There's columnists that talk about things like relationship issues, money management, apologetics, basically issues that young adults are facing. And then we also have the section, The Know, which basically kind of just deals with pop culture and cultural things that young adults are dealing with. There's also a couple other resources that some of the young adults in your class may like, particularly if they have kids or maybe they have nieces and nephews that they're involved in their lives. One of those is Home Connection, and that's available on the D6 website. And what that does is it allows people to see what every age group studied that week. So they have an idea what their kids studied, or what their nieces and nephews studied, or maybe someone they're just mentoring, what they studied as well. The other aspect is Splink. And what that is, it's a free resource that comes through email, and it gives parents some good ideas of fun things they can do with their kids that gives kind of a spiritual impact to that as well.
Okay. Well, David, thank you so much for walking me through this. It was super helpful. I'm really excited about getting going with the Brink in our class.
That's great, and I hope things go really well for your class. We're really excited for you.
Thank you.
And we want to thank you for your ministry to young adults. We really appreciate what you do, and we appreciate what you do on a weekly basis. And if you ever have any questions, please do not hesitate to talk to us. We love hearing your comments, your feedback, your questions. We love helping in any way we can.